Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we have Ognis the Dragon's Lash Treasures. This deck comes to us from Shadow Wolf 92, who says, "Nice of you. Its treasures matter, meant for high power casual." This is a very, very fun, very well built treasures deck. I don't really have too much to change, but I still wanted to show it on the channel, and I still wanted to go into a few ideas about it because I think it's already really, really strong. So as always, before we get into it, this deck list will be in the video description below. If you ever want to make treasures, especially Ognis treasures, this is an excellent place to start. The deck is really, really well built. It is, as said before, high power casual. So this is, approaching the level where we could put tutors and stuff in the deck and it'd still be good and without being, I would say, CDH level, but I don't think it also needs those things because it's already in a really fun and good place. This deck is very strong, and I once again recommend you take a look at it. Also, while you're in the video description section, you can see a link for if you want to send me your deck. You can fill out the form and I will take a look at it. And if you want your deck to be the next deck I take a look at, there is a link for that as well. So who is Ognis the Dragon's Lash, and why are we using them as our commander? Well, Ognis is really straightforward. She is a 3/3 Vashina warrior in kind of hybrid Jund colors, where you can pay only red or some combination of red and or green and black. What she says is she attacks, because she has haste. Sorry, of course she attacks. She has haste, so she attacks right away. And whenever a creature you control with haste attacks, you get a tapped treasure token. So in a way, she is a ramp commander. Um, Although if you think of her just creating one tap treasure a turn, she works kind of more like a mana dork. It's just in unison with other hasty creatures, her effect gets better and better. The more hasty creatures we have, the more treasure tokens we make. This is kind of a nice generic token, treasure token creating creature for the deck. And then the deck itself is built to either supplement or benefit from the act of creating and using treasure tokens. From things that generate treasure tokens to things that enjoy when treasure tokens are created to things that enjoy when treasure tokens are sacrificed. All in all, very, very strong. Let's take a look real quickly at the curve. The curve is really, really nice. I personally would like to see a few more one mana cards, and I'm going to suggest one or two. But otherwise, the deck itself is really, really strong. Though, when I go to 9, it is not Blasphemous Act, which I expected, but Cavern Horde Dragon. So this is the highest spell in our deck, and it is reliant on our opponents having artifacts. This is a very interesting card. I see it every now and then, and it looks to me that it's supposed to be like an anti-treasure treasure card, if that makes sense, right? It is dependent on your opponents having a lot of artifacts, and the more artifacts they have, the better this card is. Now, just remember, the problem is these artifacts cannot be spread about like around your opponents. There could be 8 artifacts in play under your opponent's control, but if someone's 3-2-1, is that 8? That's 6. So let's say 3-2-2. How did I get? Let's say 3-3-2. My goodness, math is not my strong point. Let's say they have 3-3-2 artifacts. You only get one of those threes as the reduction. So though going from 7 mana to 5 mana is really good, it's dependent on your opponent having artifacts. Sometimes there's going to be situations where none of your opponents have artifacts. It does happen. And during that time, this is a very, very expensive creature. Then, when you play it, it is a haste. I do like it generates its treasures that way. It is flample, as is commonly said, flying trample, which gives it a ton of evasion, and it is a 6/6. So it is pretty well built. And then when it hits a player, you get a treasure token for each artifact that player controls. Now these aren't tapped like Ognis, but at the same time, I don't know. At the same time, these are still kind of tricky because for the effort to put this creature out, it feels like you're not getting that much of a benefit. Once again, the ceiling is really high. You could get like what, 6, 7 treasures if you hit the right player. But if you don't have one of those players in the pod, this is generating like 2 treasures maybe, and that doesn't feel really, really good, right? That feels a little weak, especially since like our commander already does the same thing. So if the Cavern Dragon attacks and gets 2 treasures, Ognis is already giving half of that just on attack. So I don't know. I've seen this card a few times, and I'm always a little suspicious of it. Maybe it's one of those things I'd have to play with it, or I have to like say, well, your play group is what's really going to make the difference here. But overall, just reading the card, I don't understand the $20 price tag. I think this is built for a very specific meta, and I hear a lot about these metas where everyone plays treasures, and I think this would be very good there. Just briefly, I wanted to look at over here for Blood Money. Blood Money is another card that kind of catches me off guard because it's good, but you need the treasures to pay for it because 7 mana and you destroy like your creatures as well feels a bit weird, and the fact that its non-token creature destroyed this way. Like this is a lot of hoops to jump through, right? You need the 7 mana, you need a large amount of creatures, and those creatures can't be tokens, and you're losing your board. So this is hard to cast when you're behind, and even when you're ahead. Like the times that this card is really good, I don't know how often you want to cast it. I don't know how much you'd just be happier playing. And to be fair, I need to double check. Yeah, I don't know how much happier you just play Toxic Deluge, right? It's just it's just more consistent. I know it's not as fun, it doesn't make treasures, but sometimes consistency is really good in a deck like this, which is tied together through a theme. Having a few cards you can just rely on is really, really nice. And 7 mana is just a lot. Balrog is interesting. Uh, I don't think I'm going to talk too much about it. I think it's the fact that it has haste really does push it over the edge. But so what? How does this work? You have 5 treasures, you sacrifice it, you use 3 of those treasures to cast something else, and you use the last 2 treasures to cast this. That's not bad. That's not bad. I do like that. Okay. With that in mind, I do like this a lot more. Once again, you do need those 5 treasures, otherwise this costs, much more. But it is an interesting card, so I'm not going to be too hard on it. The last thing before I go through individual cards, we should kind of look at our 4 mana slot. We have cards that compete with our commander. Anger is interesting because it gives all of our creatures haste. I just don't know how reasonably you can put it into your graveyard, so I'm a little suspicious. I'll leave that to you, but I don't really like an effect like this. On the plus side, you can just cast Anger by itself as a haste creature because it'll still synergize with your commander. But if that's what you're doing and it's 4 mana, I don't think it's particularly worth it here. Jolene the Plunder Queen is such a great name for a legendary creature. I do really, really like it for sure. Get those tokens. Yeah, I think this is fine. This is really good. I don't like that it gives your opponents treasures, but like, what can you do? I think that's fine. Mirkwood Bats as well can do so much damage over time. I do really like that. And Zayatora's Envoy. I'm going to need a second to remember this. When it deals damage, look at the top card of your library. You may play a land from the top or cast a spell with mana value less or equal than the damage dealt from the top of your library without paying its mana cost. So it is a 4 mana creature that if you hit with it, you look at your top card. If it's a land, you put it into play. If it's under 5 mana, you then put it into. You can cast it. If not, you put it into your hand. That feels like a lot of work. Like I get with Blitz, it's considerably better, sorry, and that if you have the ability to give this creature haste, I do think it is really good. But at the same time, at 4 mana, I feel like there's better effects for this. Like, if we want this ability to kind of like it does cast things, and I think that's neat, but if you're playing it for like the pseudo card draw, I'd rather just a lower mana card that draws cards, but It's close. If you told me you only play this for the blitz cost, I think I'd be a little easier on it. But even then, like, I would like this every turn. Like, this is a very strong effect. It's just at a bad mana cost when you are playing it fairly, and when you're playing it unfairly, it only sticks around once. So I'm going to say I'm kind of medium on this card. It is really interesting and it's caught my eye though. Big Score. I just want to say Big Score should just be the 3 mana version of this card. I think it Seize the Spoils. I could be wrong. That's yes. I think it's not as good because this creates 2 treasures. Yeah, it creates 2 treasures, whereas Seize the Spoil creates one. However, just straightforwardly, it's 3 mana, so it's not the mana cost of your commander. So you'll be a lot happier with Seize the Spoils. And then you have the One Ring, which is great, no complaints there. Parallel Lives feels really good, so I'm not going to complain too much. I often, I don't like these doubling effects really, I'm going to be honest, but because so much of your deck creates treasure, you're almost guaranteed to be constantly using this. And with that in mind, I think it's fine to keep it. All right, is there anything else that I wanted to talk about? Um, I tried using the spoiler view. This is really hard for me to see with the spoiler view, so maybe I'll find my cards and then flip to it. And even then, I don't think there is a lot I want to say. I think the deck is just over. Okay, Bootlegger Stash. Maybe what I can do is click the cards I'm talking about to give them a little more view. Bootlegger Stash is 6 mana, and your lands now tap for create a treasure token. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. Not only is it an artifact, which makes it susceptible to the same kind of hate that the rest of your deck kind of is susceptible to, it's 6 mana to kind of do nothing a lot of the time. And there might be situations where you're like, oh, cool, my lands now create treasures, and with the right setup, that means every time I tap a land, I get 2 or 3 treasures. That's cool. But if you don't have that setup, this is just kind of bad because you're going to be using your mana each turn anyways. And this doesn't have any other interaction with treasures. So, like, for example, it doesn't make the treasures you get off of Ognis more useful, for example. It just kind of does what it says on the tin, and what it says on the tin isn't that great. I think this is a win more card. This card is good when you are ahead, and when you're ahead, you do not want to draw this card. I recently put it into a deck just to give it a try because it looks really flashy and fun, and I was severely disappointed with it every single time I drew it. So, though it has a ceiling for fun, it doesn't have a high ceiling for power. So, I don't particularly like it. Then there's a few cards that I think could just be improved. Putrefy could be, and I'm going to say Nature's Claim is the one I'm going to say. Chaos Warp is okay because you only have these 2 abilities of Chaos Warp and Beast Within. But Bedevil should be Terminate. I don't think very often you need all the modes on this card, especially when you already have Assassin's Trophy and Abrupt Decay. Rakdos Charm feels really weird here. Do you have a specific opponent that you like using it? Or is it just really fun to sometimes defeat the token player by making them take a bunch of damage? I'm not sure. Even with that case, I don't think it's a particularly good card. It is an interesting hate card, but if the stars don't align, it's just a bad card, and you don't have a lot of card draw. Finally, the last 2 cards I'm going to talk about are the Cultivate Kodama's Reach cards. These cards feel a little strange here. I would rather them just be lands. You're playing 33 lands, which is a bit low. Actually, I'm saying this a lot. The percentage chance of playing your commander is 53 playing on curve with this amount of lands, and I don't know if it knows about the mana rocks. So I'm not sure how that works. But it says at 33 lands, you have the 50% chance of playing your commander on curve. That's really bad when you think about it. Cultivate and Kodama's Reach are really good with decks that want to get tons and tons of mana. And you are already good at generating mana at a much cheaper rate, even if it's temporary. I don't think this is the kind of deck that wants these cards. I just want them to be lands. Just take these 2 cards out and put 2 lands in. It's not as flashy and it's not as fun, but it'll help you cast your commander on curve. And in addition, I don't know if you guys can hear the sirens in the background, but in addition, you'll just have a better time with it. It's one of those changes that isn't fun, but it's just sometimes necessary. All right. Oh, last one. Once again, I find myself talking about there and back again. I don't understand what the appeal of this card is. The smog, I imagine, is what it is, with the potential to create 14 treasure tokens. So here's the thing, right? I feel like playing a saga for its last effect is like playing a planeswalker for its ultimate. Now, don't get me wrong, this is flawed thinking because it is really easy for this saga to get to 3. But it is a bit foolhardy because, like, think of all of the best sagas in these formats. They're often played for their second or first ability primarily, and the rest is gas. Those are really good because if you don't get to that third saga, you don't tend to mind. And something to consider with that is if this is coming out with 5 mana, then you have to wait 2 additional turns to get the dragon. Then the dragon has to die, and then you get the 14 treasure tokens. Also, as a reminder, as I've said a bunch of times, the dragon has to die. It can't be exiled or bounced or anything like that. If anything happens to Smog that you don't like, you don't get the treasure tokens. This is just a very susceptible card. I'm sorry, I cut myself off. The amount of time it takes to get Smog, the game might be over at that point. And if you're like, well, Curse, doesn't matter. I've ramped to 5 really fast, so I can play this out early. Yeah, but wouldn't you rather play a number of your other five drops instead? Like, aren't there just so many better cards here that you would rather play? Like Goldspan Dragon, for example. Like, there's a lot, but it's just I don't think you want to play there and back again instead. So I find this card to just stick out as a particularly bad card. Its first ability of locking down a creature for 3 turns is kind of interesting. I do really like that ability, but the rest just doesn't work well. You get a mountain, you don't want that for 5 mana, and then finally getting Smog, who is very, very vulnerable to a lot of relevant hate in the format. I just don't see this being worth 5 mana. All right, so what am I going to suggest? I am going to suggest first and foremost, I just want to make sure. You know what I'm going to suggest? I'm going to suggest, is it Nimble? It is a 1 mana, maybe it's in here. Enchantments. No, you don't have it here. It is a aura that is 1 mana in red that makes treasures. And 1 mana. Some kind of it's Sticky Fingers. That's what it is. I'm surprised you're not playing it, honestly. Sticky Fingers is really good in a hasty kind of deck. It has just a lot of text that's just really good. Enchanted Creature has Menace, which is good, and when it deals damage, it makes a treasure token, which is on theme. And then when Enchanted Creature dies, you draw a card. That's a lot of text that's really relevant in your deck. You could throw it on your commander and attack without having any problem. You could throw it on a number of other hasty creatures like Atlan Jackal that you want to connect. And then when the creature dies, instead of getting 2 for 1, Sticky Fingers will get you that card back. If you're playing Beamtown Beatstick and you're enjoying it, I think for sure you should play Sticky Fingers. These cards are like cousins. They do very similar things, and both of these things are pretty good in your deck, and I don't think you'll be too sad to be getting it. However, I will note that Sticky Fingers once again sets up the situation where I go down and I look at Cavern Horde Dragon, and I start really questioning how strong it is, because once again, we can just start if Cavern Horde Dragon is getting 2 treasures when it hits, and you get 1 from Ognis and 1 from Sticky Fingers anyways, like that's just so much. This is so many hoops to jump through to just get kind of a bad creature. All right, so let's see what else I want to say. I want to say just generic cards that I think the deck could use. Nature's Claim, I feel like, is missing and could replace Putrefy very easily. It's just a 1 mana card you'd be pretty happy with. Just being a little lower on mana cost and removal is really nice with Treasure, and the fact that it doesn't hit creatures doesn't make it a broken card. Likewise, you're in red. Lightning Bolt is always a good inclusion here. The fact that it destroys a lot of relevant creatures while missing big creatures still makes it fair for high power casual. Also, it is just a fun card. And then finally, a few inclusions. Knight's Whisper allows you to draw 2 cards. I just talked about these cards, but Black Draw is really, really nice. I think, in your maybes, Phyrexian Arena. So Knight's Whisper, Read the Bones, and Phyrexian Arena are all here to help you draw a few extra cards so you don't run out of gas. Your deck is really, really good, and it does feel like it's missing just a little bit of draw to keep going. And I think those few cards will just be really, really nice for you. Now, if you wanted to make this deck a little more than high power casual. And to be fair, when you say high power casual, like I said at the beginning of the video, I am interpreting this as strong, but no tutors and no fast mana. That is my interpretation, and maybe no infinite combos. But this is a very strong deck. Like, I wouldn't call this casual. I recognize there's this nebulous kind of space between casual and competitive where everyone thinks their deck belongs. But to me, when I think casual, I think players that are just excited to play creatures and turn them sideways and just excited to cast their commander. That's really it. There's not a ton of synergy, there's not a ton of strategy. Just, precons, right? That to me is casual. Then the middle ground is, basically anything between making our way past through strategies and ideas to well-designed decks, to the limit being you're playing tutors, free counter spells, infinite combos, fast mana, but you are not playing a CEDH deck. That's where the middle point stops. And then after that, you have CEDH. That last part is a little nebulous as well, but that's the problem with a format like this. So once again, I think this is definitely stronger than casual. It's somewhere in the middle. So for someone who might want to take this deck and make it a little stronger, I just want to suggest Necropotence. I think it fits just really, really well in this deck. It's incredibly easy to cast with Treasure and will solve a lot of your mana problems. After that, if you say Cursed, I still want this deck to be stronger, what should I do? Well, then, mono like Black Tutors, Worldly Tutoring Green, Gamble, and the like are cards that naturally fit into a deck like this because there's some cards that are just really, really strong. And after which you could be even pickier on some of the weaker cards, which there aren't many, which is why I haven't really gone through it. But the deck itself is just really strong, so you have quite a high ceiling if you wanted to power it up. All right, let me check how long this video has been going for. Not too long. I honestly don't have that much to say about it because the deck is just really, really good. I think there's a few directions to think about. You could play Concordant Crossroads in order to get... No. Yes, Concordant Crossroads. I'm mixing it with Cascading Cataract. Concordant Crossroads to give all creatures haste. That's a world enchantment for 1 green. And that could help you with your creatures that don't have haste. It does give your opponents haste, but you tend not to mind because if all your creatures and your opponent's creatures are swinging out, it usually means they don't have blockers, and you're going to be pretty happy about that. Likewise, if you want to hoard the haste, you could play Crashing Footfalls and be pretty, pretty happy. Your Crashing Footfalls, what am I talking about? You could play Crashing Drawbridge. That makes a lot more sense. You could play Crashing Drawbridge to give your creatures haste as needed. You're already playing Rhythm of the Wild. I think that's enough. Anger is kind of there. I'm just suggesting that if you would want a little more, you could get a little more. Urbrass the Hidden, I see that as your final one. I just don't like our haste enablers being at 5 mana. I want our haste enablers to be 3 and below so that we can get all our creatures attacking. Anyways, all in all, I do really, really like this deck. I think already it's just really strong, and I have next to no problems with it. I'd be really interested to see another draft of it, or honestly, I could just sleeve this up. I actually have the majority of this deck, so in my mind, I could sleeve this up and play it and give it a go. It looks really strong. It looks really fun. It does everything that I think would be fun in a treasures deck. I think the only thing I would completely cut out is probably Revel in Riches when it comes down to it. I own Revel in Riches, and I feel like I should trade it away or something. This is the kind of card that other people tend to like. But I don't think you're going to have a good time. If we're saying high-powered casual, playing Revel in Riches and waiting a turn cycle isn't particularly fun. And if you're playing high power post casual, so high, just generally like higher power, this won't work, right? Your opponents will either take you out of the game or destroy Revel and Riches and give you like an elephant for your trouble, right? So with that in mind, I don't tend to like a card like this. It's just placed weirdly, right? Either it's really good and your opponents won't like playing against it, or it's going to be bad because your opponents are prepared for it. So with that in mind, I think I'll just end the video here because otherwise I'm just going to talk phrases about this deck for a while. And I guess I could say that one more time. This is a great deck. Thank you so much for sending it my way. I hope you're having a lot of fun with the deck, and I hope anyone who sees a treasure deck and they want an idea, they start here. If you'd like to send me a new draft of the deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description below. And if you'd like that video that I make to be the next video I make, there is a link for that too. If you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, help the YouTube algorithm push this video forward, I'd be very grateful. And yeah, Ognis is great, and good luck improving this deck.